a very warm welcome. You're joining us here for an exclusive conversation with Emma Wilkie, Managing Director of the Gun Report. Let me take it straight across to what the Gun Report is really about. Emma, if you had to explain to a layperson, what is it exactly about?
The Gun Report is a ranking of creativity in advertising for the industry. It started in 1999 and was created to measure creative effectiveness or creativity in the industry. We think it's a very important measure that the industry abides by its creative principles. So that's why it was started.
Take us through some of the areas, some of the sectors that Gun Report really focuses on.
So obviously we very much focus on the work. When the Gun Report started, of course, it was very much the internet days. So obviously the industry has changed enormously. So originally, when it first started, we covered the areas of film and print and outdoor. Obviously, the times have now moved on, so we cover the rest of the industry as well. Although we have, there are so many different areas and different award shows deal with it differently. So we have an umbrella terminology called the All Guns Blazing section, which covers the new, the innovative work that's coming forward now in the industry. But obviously, we also cover the advertisers, countries, the agencies, the agency networks, and so on and so forth. So there are a number of rankings that we do.
As far as the Indian market is concerned, Emma, how exciting is it for you as you've been dealing with the sector for a while now?
Yeah, India is really coming into its own as a creative country. It's great to see that it's really emerging, and there are some great players out here now who are producing some fantastically creative work. In terms of its ranking within the global picture, it's fairly consistent at the moment. They usually rank around about the 13th in the world, which is great, but it's also in line really with the amount of ad spend. They are the 13th country in the world in terms of that they spend on advertising as well. So it's sort of fairly consistent. Their creativity is where it should be, as it were, but obviously there's always room to go up.
Why Gun Report? What is the inspiration for starting the Gun Report?
Well, the Gun Report was started by Donald Gunn, hence the name. And Donald had his entire career spent at Leo Burnett as a creative director, and he spent his last 10 years at Leo Burnett doing creative research. And to him, he thought it was very important that creativity should be celebrated, but also he did a number of studies that proved the link between creative advertising and effective advertising. So, creativity is not just there for the sake of it. It obviously sells the client's products better, and it's been proven. We've done a number of case studies, or a number of studies that proves that creative advertising is far more effective.
And with the way forward, what exactly is Gun Report looking at in the way of expansion or in the way of focus areas? Well,
obviously the industry is changing, as we know, on a daily basis. So we are constantly looking at how that is changing and how we will adapt the report, in order to reflect what's going on in the industry. We have now just partnered up with a company called Walk, who do what we do for creativity, they do for effectiveness. So we're looking at ways of working together to do a combined ranking or something of that nature going forward. So exciting times ahead.
Exciting times ahead, clearly, but given the digital space and the way, like you said, it's constantly evolving, according to you, is that a challenge?
It is a challenge. I think the industry needs to, as you say, technology is there, but technology on its own is not going to sell product. So you need the creative use of that technology in order to make it work for you, rather than just using technology for technology's sake.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves over the next few years as the industry gets their head around using that technology.
Sure, fair enough. But also on the issue of Brexit, would you like to talk about that as well?
Well, obviously, coming from the UK, Brexit is very much on the agenda at the moment. I think it's a huge shame that our country chose to opt out of the European Union. But I suppose it is a reflection of the fact that people feel that then, I don't know, that we are not in control of our destiny. I suppose that's, we have to go with obviously the majority view, so we are going to be leaving one way or another.
How many years have you been in the UK overall?
Oh, I am from the UK. I grew up in the UK.
So having been there for so long, how do you think things have really changed pre and post Brexit?
Well, obviously there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment because nobody really knows how it's going to impact. But I think what has become very clear is that obviously it was nearly a 50-50, so half, we have a very divided country in terms of how they feel the country is involved in Europe or not involved in Europe. I think there's a big difference between London and outside of London. London is sort of almost a country on its own within a country, and maybe the people who are not from London don't, they feel that their views and their opinions are not being taken into consideration. So I suspect that's probably why we ended up voting out.
And what the immediate challenge, according to you, is going to be, given the scenario, and also given the fact that there's so much, like you're saying, uncertainty about which way the country is headed?
Well, I think that, the answer to that is I don't know. The challenges are going to be simply how the government, what connections and how we're going to be able to continue trading with our European partners and forging obviously we have to forge other links around the world, which we already have, but we need to make those stronger, one assumes.
Having been in the UK, born and brought up in the UK, UK has just witnessed one of the deadliest attacks in Manchester. Soft targets like a concert, a number of children present there. It's a difficult time for the UK given the fact that we've seen terror activity on the rise in the UK there.
I think it's a difficult time for everyone. It's not just the UK. Obviously, we've had attacks in France and all over the place. So it's not particular to the UK. It obviously is. It makes it more shocking when it's so close to home. But wherever it happens, it's an appalling situation. We can only hope that through negotiation or somehow, we can put an end to this situation. But at the moment, I think everybody's just in a state of shock, and we wait to find out what the actual background to the story was.
Emma Wilkie, appreciate you joining us here at WION. A number of issues that, of course, that we focused on already, but looking forward to hearing more about the gun report.
Thank you.
We're now joined by David Weeks, who's the Executive Director for The Week. He tells me that there's no connection with his last name and the company he works for. He's here from London and India to talk about his successes in the world of business. David, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Talk to us about your journey. You have 20 years, I understand, of experience working with international companies. How has that been like? What an incredible journey.
Yeah, it's been great. I think, I love media. I love advertising. I think the creativity of the business is just irresistible. I think, if you can find an opportunity to work with a brand, to allow it to communicate, maybe on a different frequency, it's very exciting. It's always something new. That's what I like about it. It's a restless creativity throughout the business. Media sales is a tough game, but people buy people, and more importantly now than ever, they buy ideas.
They buy ideas, they buy people. How important is that storytelling aspect when it comes to really selling that pitch?
I think it's always been important, because I think throughout history, you've had the idea of the storyteller's always been, it's had a mystical quality. It's captured people's imaginations, and what's interesting now is this value of content has soared, and I think it's not just the message. People want to know, where did that message comes from, and more importantly, even with content. Everybody loves content. It's got to be content based. Yeah, but content's nothing without context, and the story is the thing that gives it context. So I think stories don't always have to be backward looking. They're not always historic. I think people can have a story about where they're going as much as where they've been.
Well, let's put you to the test. Where is your story going? Talk to us about your vision, your future. Okay,
so I think in terms of the business, because I represent The Week magazine in the UK, it's part of Dennis Publishing. We've got a 20-year history, which should make us almost perhaps dated as an idea, but interestingly, being a curator of content is now as much as a valuable idea as it maybe was 20 years ago, maybe even more. The story for us now and most probably going forward is an interesting space, because less is more. People will pay a premium for reduced content, or a less volume of content. So somebody who can give you an intelligent guide or interpretation, and more importantly context, by using multiple sources and hopefully a more objective view, is now more valuable maybe even than it was 5 years ago. We've seen a particular spike recently with the news, the fake news concept. You know, there may be the element of distrust in mass media, or and therefore a need for maybe an intelligent filter on that perspective. And that's why we are surprisingly, I suppose, sometimes to some people, a relatively small title, will say a 200,000 circulation in the UK, but able to maintain a massively, it's sort of like, I suppose, an unusual paywall, a premium, where most of our readers are subscribers. They're paying a premium for the product because they're almost paying for a service that we provide. And that's how we add value. There's no shortage of media out there. There's no shortage of content. I think the really sort of smart consumer now is realizing that sometimes you have to trust the experts to find the good stuff for you.
Well, you mentioned fake news. It certainly is a hot button issue that a lot of people are talking about, especially with U.S. President Donald Trump.
Yes.
And, you know, it's really out there, and there's always been a little bit of a mistrust with the media. I think people are always doubting or casting, you know, is this accurate? Is this relevant? How do you stay relevant and really bring that integrity? You know, and you have to convince people that, you know, yes, this is the truth, this is important, this is real journalism.
That's a very good question, and I think it's one that I've seen raised at a lot of different conferences and discussions and panels recently that I've attended. And you know, the phrase that we use is that we live maybe in a post-trust era, in the sense that trust as a metric, it's incredibly important. I mean, a brand relies on it for its success. If a brand suddenly doesn't become trusted, it gets in trouble quite quickly. But I think the post-trust era just means people's expectations and maybe measures of trust have changed, they've shifted. Fake news is a great buzzword. It's, you know, will it last? Is it here to stay? We don't know, but it's important to maybe find a way to counter that. I don't think there's one thing that will solve it, because any source could be seen as biased or maybe restricted in its content. I don't know whether real pure trust ever exists. The way we counter it in our brand is that we, first of all, look at the quality of the sources. So I think there's an interesting counter effect here, where you're seeing the mass media portals, let's say, of some of the digital feeds are gradually becoming slightly less trusted in comparison to the work of the journalist. Somebody who's maybe trained or worked for 20 years to gain that insight and that incisive perspective as a professional writer, there's a sort of swing back towards, hang on, how authoritative is this? And I think if you get authoritative, professional, well-researched content, that usually scores higher on the trust metric for the reader. The thing we add then is actually to look at several different sources. So we'll look at maybe in an issue of the week up to 200 different sources. Obviously not just about one story, but if we're looking at the main issues, we'll look at the FT, we'll look at the Times, we'll look at the Daily Mail, we'll look at maybe HuffPo's perspective, and we'll give that sort of mosaic content, you know, together. We'll never tell the reader what to think. They still got to make up their mind. But we'll really have a good look about what the professionals in their perspective are seeing or thinking.
Well, speaking of trust, you know, this generation is growing up with its digital platforms, your social media, your YouTube, your Facebook, your Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram. I mean, we're dealing with a different way to curate content. What extent or what role does social media play in your workplace and to your audiences?
I think, you know, do you know what, to be honest, it's a growing area of our business. I wouldn't say that it's that advanced, because we're in a fortunate position where, you know, the millennial social demographic or demographic is of course of great interest, but it is only one demographic. And I think that, yeah, we'll need to adapt. You know, we're employing a social media strategy now, experimenting with Facebook and others, to become discoverable. And I think that's really how we'll need to use social media, because like everything, you always have a generation era that people would think, well, hang on, a certain person over this age won't read or consume this. Well, you know, I ran a panel the other day with speaking to a millennial audience, and, you know, about half of them read magazines. The Week isn't just a magazine, it has a successful website and a daily app as well. So what I think happens is people's needs and values change as they get older. Maybe their lives get a bit more complicated. maybe even perhaps they have less time. And I think that's one thing where we look at the millennial generation as fascinating, quite rightly, and they are maybe the consumers of tomorrow, one could say. But they're going to move through life stages and time as well. And I think I want my brand to be there for lots of different generations rather than just focusing on one.
All right, and as we wrap this up, you have so many experiences with working with different people.
Yeah.
I understand different folks from around the world as well.
Yeah.
In different groups, certainly the business has evolved, it's changed, and it continues to change. Perhaps give us your advice, lessons learned for people who are trying to get a grasp of this, things that they need to know to succeed from your lens.
Well, that's a very flattering opportunity you give me, but also quite a tough one, I think. In that respect, do you know what, from an instinctive point of view, originality is very important. But don't expect an original idea that you think is great to wow everybody. Please remember, people need to buy. Right? And so selling your idea in is clearly for most people the most important bit. But that partnership and selling the value of partnership and trust over time is so important, because just making a successful transaction doesn't grow a business and it doesn't grow a brand. And just maybe a good piece of advice that somebody told me is make sure you do two things. First of all, it's about empathy. Understand your client. The tenure of most CMOs, certainly in Europe, is around 2 years now. They'll stay in that job for 2 years. They'll want proven results, they'll maybe want a great case study, an award if they can, a keen eye on cost, and they'll want originality and something they can maybe own or add to their portfolio. So be empathetic, understand what it's like for them to come in and do their job, not just to survive in it and keep their job, because it's tough, everybody knows marketing is tough, but they'll not just want to survive, you want to help them thrive. And the other piece of advice I think somebody, a very wise friend of me gave me is, think about brand you. We all talk about brands as in, well, I'm going to work with Coca-Cola or I'm going to work with BMW, and we all love those brands. But sometimes in all of this, there's always worthwhile a bit of time to think about, well, how do you want people to think about you, the person fronting your business? If you want them to buy from you, make it easy for them to buy you.
Right.
And that's your brand.
And I like to say you are your own brand. If people don't know what you're selling, they're not going to understand that. So
absolutely, brand.
Qualities are essential.
Yeah, there's a very good book written by a friend of mine, and it's called Brand You, and that is something I'd recommend.
All right, thank you so much for your time, David Weeks, giving us his perspective about branding, about international business, and about the world of media and how it's evolved throughout the years. I'm joined by someone who helps you with your brand, your identity, and what you see before you go out to decide to buy a product. Faisal Amin is the co-founder of Fruit Bowl. He's based in Mumbai. Started this project about 6 years ago. Faisal, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
How did this idea start about? I mean, where was the conception behind Fruit Bowl?
Okay, so after completing my MBA, I really wanted to get into advertising. I worked with a couple of companies as a brand manager. What I realized was, one brand is not really fulfilling enough. So me and my partner Didi, we met in college. We've done our MBA together. Both of us are very passionate about advertising. So we decided we'll start something together. We basically started as two people, freelance sort of a company. Over the period of time, we've grown fantastically. We worked with some of the larger brands, and yeah, it's been fun.
What motivates you? What's your inspiration behind this model? Advertising is an industry that attracts a lot of people. The way consumers deal with ads, whether it's online, whether it's websites, print, television, YouTube, it's everywhere.
Correct.
Brand building is so essential. What motivated you toward that subject?
I think I like to quote Steve Jobs here. Nobody could have put it better than him. He said, when I go to sleep, I should feel I did something good today. That's what keeps us moving. For the past 6 years, it's been phenomenal. And the way you put it correctly, digital is not something new. It's advertising, just that the platform is different. With digital, the beauty is you get to learn something new every day. The way things are moving and changing in digital is phenomenal. So yeah, you keep learning, and it's very fulfilling.
You started 6 years back. How have things changed over the last 6 years? Where have you seen the biggest growth?
Correct. So over the last 2 years, we have seen a total CAGR of 20% in the digital industry. The growth has been fantastic. Initially, when we started, people looked as, oh, this is just something new which might fade away over the period of time. But now, we are regarded as a proper agency, right? Earlier, digital people used to be like, we'll think about it when my competitor starts doing it, or probably let's talk after 3 years or 4 years. People did not really allocate specific budgets for digital. But over the period of time, the way Google, Facebook, and a lot of other platforms are performing, we've realized that people are actually allocating separate budgets for that, and they're realizing the importance of digital. Out of the entire marketing budget, we know clients who allocate more than 50% to digital, because one, it gives you phenomenal results. Two, you can go very targeted, unlike in newspaper advertising where you create an advertising and basically it's a scattered message which reaches out to everybody. So you can now target, pinpoint people and reach out to them.
Who are your bigger clients? Who are some of the clients that you work with, and what are some of their concerns, and how do you all help them?
Correct. So I think every client comes with a very different requirement, and we as an agency, we don't have set packages. We customize and make each of our offerings as well as the pricing for each of our clients. So some of the bigger clients that we work with, Pepper Fry's there, you've got your Mumbai Metro, Zodiac Clothing we've worked with for quite some time, Society Tea, Vadilal Ice Creams, Saint Gobain Weber, actually I'm forgetting. So we work with a lot of clients, and most of them are like very, 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 very interesting. So different clients come with different requirements. For example, for Mumbai Metro, the idea of going on digital is to understand what consumers are feeling about them. How are they being perceived? Second, most importantly, they want to understand if something is happening, what are people talking about? If something is negative, so they can control it immediately. So unlike the earlier times when something goes wrong, the press covers them and then they can come back with a PR story. With the digital world, things happen fast, like in a blink of a second, right? Somebody sees something, he tweets, and before you realize there are hundreds of tweets and the message is going viral. For example, there was a water leak in Metro that happened, so we kind of control it within 5 minutes of things happening. So all these things, for example, Weber, they were new in India, they were launching, so they wanted people to know about. A real estate comes to me and says, I really want to, when people are looking for a 2 BHK or 3 BHK, my property should show up. How do I go about that? An FMCG brand comes with an objective of creating a more lasting brand image, creating a recall. So I think everybody is different, and that's the best part about it.
Let's also talk about that, in the Indian ecosystem, startups. There have been so many startups that have developed, that have boomed, that continue to evolve. What were some of the challenges for Fruitbowl in terms of creating its own identity, its own space to stay relevant in the market? I
think one of the biggest challenges was we were not from Bombay. Second, since this is a very low entry barrier market, anybody with a laptop essentially and a little bit of understanding of design can start an agency. So when we started 6 years back, there were 800 plus digital agencies in Bombay itself. So that was one of the biggest challenges, attracting talent, getting good talent and retaining them, doing work which is fulfilling, because advertising industry in itself is very consuming, right? You hit the office at 10 o'clock, you might end up working till 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the night, and the work is not inspiring enough, you just lose the charm. So I think getting good work and being able to satisfy yourself is and was the biggest challenge, and it still remains. We are more than 100 people at this point of time. We're spread across multiple offices. But if for a week I don't get to do a good work, or if I'm not sitting in a campaign discussion, I somehow feel that I'm missing out on something. It's more fulfilling to me than a vacation, honestly. What about the international scene? Is there plans to expand, or what's the perception of, do you have international clients that have perhaps approached you who want to do business in India? How does that equation fit together? Correct. So we work with a couple of international clients as well. We offer a lot of white label services as well. We're planning to set up a small unit in Dubai. We have already franchised a unit in Boston, and we have got a unit in Valence. So these two are international offices where we get a lot of in-source business, because at the end of the day, digital is something which you don't really need to be physically present there. As far as your communication is perfect and you've got a good design sense, things can happen remotely. So, and the beauty is, Boston and Valence, both of these places, you can pick projects in dollars and pounds and get it executed at the rate of a rupee. So that's a win-win. Let's also talk about lessons learned, perhaps for future startups, those in the world of business, maybe looking to launch their own firm, their company. What's your piece of advice to them? What would you like them to know so they don't make the same mistakes that you guys might have faced? Okay, that's a wonderful question. I feel there are two sorts of startups. One, which you build organically yourself, and the second, which you really see booming across, is investor-funded startups. We work with a lot of investor-funded startups. I wouldn't like to name them. But I think what they forget is, at the end of the day, the investor's money is also your money. You've got to spend it wisely. You got to hire the right resources, because it's resources that make the company. You cannot run the show single-handedly unless until you don't have a second layer team which is fantastic and probably better than you. You cannot really outgrow yourself. Yeah, and most importantly, be fair, be competitive. It's not a short-term thing. You're not looking to make all the money in 6 months and run away. So understand that it's about brand building over the period of time, which actually gives you the result, and not what you're making this month or what you're going to be making the next month.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much.